Morning, everyone. Can you hear me? Steve, can you hear me? Felix? If you can hear me, just raise a hand. I'd like to confirm that I am being heard loud and clear. If you can hear me, just raise a hand. Let me see how many can clearly get me. If you can hear me, just raise a simple hand so that I know we are together. Okay. Right, guys. Michael, thank you for the confirmation. All right, so good morning, everyone. From Nairobi. Welcome to today's YLBJ's webinar. As usual, I'm your host, Cephas Okoth. I'm the founder and leader at Cyber in Africa, and we do media for cybersecurity. It's my pleasure to be hosting you every other Friday and to be hosting you particularly today as we talk about cyber risk and fraud management. And of course, with us, we have a few guests, some usual faces. I was almost calling them usual suspects. And then, of course, we have, we have a new guest as well in the panel. So I've been asking them to introduce themselves, but in the meantime, please plan to engage with us. Use the chat section for questions, for comments, for clarifications. If you have some nice resources, links to them, please share them in the chat section as well. We want to ensure that you're learning both in the conversation and using the links and the different resources you guys can share with each other. Okay, so I'd like to introduce my guests today, and we have our host Steve, we have Felix, then we have Crispa, and I will start with the lady. Crispa, please introduce yourself.
Okay, good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Thank you for having me today. My name is Crispa Bazalachi. I'm a telecommunications engineer by training. I'm a certified information systems auditor. I'm also certified in risk and information systems control. I'm a member of the ISACA Kampala chapter and Shillits Tech. My journey, my experience so far, I've held roles where I've provided IT assurance, and I've done that as an external auditor within the financial services industry and telecommunications. Again, I am very happy to be here. I look forward to learning from each and every one of you, the panelists and everyone in the audience. And I'm also ready to share what I have learned on this journey, the lessons I've learned, and my experiences. Again, thank you so much for having me. Over to
Please
you.
introduce yourself. Steve?
Hello.
Okay, there you go.
Good.
Can
Sorry.
hear you now.
Yes. Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot, Cephas. Great to be back here. One, I'd like to welcome everyone onto this webinar. This is part of the series run by YLBJs. Every other Friday, we have a session analyzing, discussing a topic of interest for the East African market. And this session today is also another exciting discussion, and we look forward to sharing and learning from everyone. Yeah, thanks a lot. Back to you, Cephas.
Sweet. Okay, Felix.
Good morning, everyone. You can get me right?
Yes. Okay. Hear you. I can hear you.
Thank you. So my name is Michael Felix Ngoge. I'm security analyst at Yale Bridges. and also a forensic investigator at the same institution. I'm very happy to be here to come and share the kind of knowledge that we've been having in the space. And I look forward to sharing with everyone, especially with our audience, because they form the basic part of why we do what we do every day. And we also thank the cyber criminals for giving us jobs. So at the end of the day, we all have to form an ecosystem. So I'm looking forward to this discussion, and welcome everyone.
Yeah, welcome, Felix, and thanks for the shout out to the bad guys.
Yeah.
Yeah. So again, thanks, guys, for coming through. A quick one: you can go to the chat section. We've posted some links over there. Just go ahead and connect with the people, the institutions there. Follow us on LinkedIn, Twitter, and in all the other spaces. Feel free to reach out, and let's get this conversation going beyond this webinar. All right, so let's get into it then. And you're talking about cyber risk, cyber fraud, and risk management. All right, and you know, with the current crisis, I don't know if I should call it recent or current, because it seems that things are going back into the new normal or the next normal. But again, COVID-19 has forced businesses to you know, adopt new ways of working, you know, new demands. And you know, we have criminals who are sort of leveraging the changes and you know, and the new demands and to exploit, you know, organizations and people. So you know, if I can start with the lady panelist, Krista. Have you seen any interesting trends during this pandemic period with regards to fraud and some of the risks we are facing as a society?
Thank you. So from where I am seated, pretty much the same kinds of fraud that happened before are still happening, only that now there is kind of another twist to it. For example, if I can use phishing, you know, because of COVID and you don't have, okay, you have governments that are giving relief and people have run out of, okay, some people have run out of jobs, or people who had businesses are, you know, out on the businesses. So they are sort of very vulnerable to phishing attacks. So someone will send you an email and say, you know, the government is trying to assist you, and in order to receive this assistance, give us this information. So it's still something that was there before, only that now it's taken sort of a COVID twist. And then the other thing I can think of is a lot of what we do has gone online. Yeah, for example, in the banks, a lot of what you used to do at the branch or in the within the medical sector, there was a lot of, you know, having to go and speak to a doctor, but a lot of that now is happening online, where you have, you know, you can call into a call center, describe your symptoms, and then maybe they can have someone come to check you and stuff like that. So those, that's what I can think of offhand right now. And each and every one of those creates a new, not exactly new, it creates a different dimension into how the organization is supposed to manage that. Yeah, I don't know if that answers the question.
Well, it's true for sure that, you know, a lot of the risks and the threats haven't changed. They've literally just taken a COVID. They're leveraging COVID to either be distributed, propagated, and things like those. Any thoughts from Mike and Steve? Any interesting things you have seen in the wild? It could be new, it could be old, but you know, with a whole different angle and game to it. I'll start with Felix.
All right. So, yeah, I think there's a lot that has been happening in the space so far. And I think I don't know whether you saw this report by Kaspersky saying that Kenya is now ranked #1 as one of the fastest country that is being hit by cyber criminals. So apparently we are number one in the cyber criminals list in terms of cyber attacks. So Kenya is one of the countries that's being targeted a lot by cyber criminals because of different issues. One of them being that we are a tech-savvy country and we are taking up a lot of technology without a security aspect in mind. And number two, I think the number of people who are exposed to the internet, they are really not aware of what is happening within the internet space. Right now, we are seeing that we are in the process of launching 5G as Kenya, and yes, it's still in the trial period. We've still seen these Google loans that are doing rounds around East Africa, and that is all part of us wanting to take up technology. But yes, all this tech is coming to us, but no one is telling us or telling the people that this is what you need to do in order to avoid security concerns. So, like for example, let me take you back to when the Google loan was being launched by the president. A couple of concerns came up, especially in terms of privacy, in terms of security of now the people who will be exposed to these. But again, the conversation died down because of various reasons. I don't know why. But if you look at the kind of the way that we Kenyans and Eastern African we are taking up technology, we really are not putting in enough muscle in the security or investing in the security perspective as we are putting in taking up that technology. So at the end of the day, you'll find out that we are really exposing ourselves and we are really putting our systems out there without any security concern, and we'll still go ahead to being hit in terms of social engineering because we are not aware, the public is not aware of security concerns that are out there. Phishing, you'll find others that we are actually being targeted from a point of state attacks. Like a couple of, I think last month, there was an advisory about a state attack coming from a nation country to some of our local banks here in Kenya. So there's a very huge culture first from ourselves that we need to have a look at as we address these security concerns. And now COVID has even presented even more kind of concerns that we really need to look at. So I think for now, let me just stop at that. We'll discuss more as we move along with the conversation.
Yeah, interesting points about some of the gaps that you're experiencing, that of opportunities for these exploits and attacks to happen, less awareness, more new tech and things like those. Any thoughts from you, Steve?
Very well. I hope you can hear me. I think one thing we also need to appreciate is that cybersecurity is more of a societal issue rather than a technology. And our topic for today is about cyber fraud, which of course falls in the family of cybercrime. And when you think of fraud, you think of individuals or even organizations wanting to either use technology or commit this fraud on the technologies that have been provided. So let's also take a step back and understand why do people also get involved in cyber fraud. And when we are still on that topic, it's important to appreciate that what are the key, what I'll call more of, not principles per se, but why do people commit fraud? I think that's a very important question for us to discuss as we go into cyber fraud. And of course, there's always the bit of opportunity that yes, I have a system or there's a system that we can exploit. So let's take advantage of that. There could be also the rationale, and I think this is more prominent in financial institutions, that this money that we are defrauding this organization does not belong to an individual. It probably belongs to a group, or it's not an individual per se who will be directly impacted. And thirdly, also because we've spoken about the opportunity, there's the rationale, and also that others are doing it. So why should I not do it? And again, when you look at our country, Kenya, when we discuss about corruption, it's a topic that everyone knows. And now I'm trying to divert the conversation to think of more of cyber frauds that happen internally, more of an insider threat. So that's the biggest and I think the highest risk for any other organization. Because the external threats will always be there. One way or the other, we could figure out how to deal with them. But for the insiders, guys who are working with us, either directly as employees, partners, contractors, vendors, that's an area of concern for any other organization that operates today digitally. So I thought it's important to bring out those points as we progress on with the conversation.
Yeah, good point. It seems today I've sort of jumped to the basics, where we need to talk about what fraud and financial crime really is, and how do they sort of converge, and then also aspects of motivation for cyber fraud. What are the benefits? What is the end game and things like that. But thanks for bringing those up. If all of you at any time, you can always refer back to those aspects of this conversation. And that would be great. But let me, a very interesting point I have just thought about is that as much as you're seeing a lot of the same kind of threats and attacks happening from phishing to others, it fascinates me how we always say cybersecurity is a very exciting field, and we have new things happening every day. But these threats seem to be the same old ones. Cybersecurity is changing, is evolving, but threats are pretty much the same. I mean, it just fascinates me, how that is. But
it's the same monkey in different forests.
Yeah.
I mean, you could think of it that way, but how come? Are we not really having new threats? Coming around. Have the bad guys really exhausted? And shout out to them, because they're making this game always interesting. Are there no new threats? But food for thought, everyone.
I really
Okay,
can't say that they are not new threats per se. I think what the adversary does, remember, they're also humans like you and I. Nobody really wants to work very hard. So if I have an arsenal that works for organization A and it can work for organization B, C, why should I really waste my time also trying to develop another malware or develop another scheme? Well, my one arsenal is working for over 5 institutions. So just deploy the same thing 10 times. It's simple. Simple mathematics also.
I think I want to come in from another school of thought. We should look at why do these criminals want to attack these organizations? Because one, they're after the data, two, they're after the money, or they're after damage of reputation. If they are after something different, I think the goals remain to be the same. So it's either money, data, or reputation of the organization. So if the goal is still the same, what changes is the how you get to the goal. So the kind of approach that you get there still is the one that varies, but at the end of the day, the goal still remains the same. I want your money. How do I get the money? It's me to figure out. So if my arsenal, like Steve said, works for you, it might not also work for someone else. So I have to craft another different method to get to another person. So you'll find that there are different ways in how organizations are being attacked, and that is the exciting part about being in security, because each and every day you have to learn about something that is new. Because today, the way we attack, let's say, a bank through either Active Directory or something totally different, may be very different from how I attacked a manufacturing company, because a manufacturing company has different systems. But at the end of the day, the criminals are after the same goal. It's money, it's data, it's reputation of that company. It's taking that organization down. But I think the reason why you're saying that we are talking of the same kind of attacks is because, yes, if I get, I'm trying to look for a legal way to say this without getting in trouble. If if you're to drive to, let's say, Kampala, you can use Uganda, Rwanda, and then yes, you can use Tanzania, Rwanda, then to Kampala. Also, you can either try to go to Nairobi directly to Kampala. But there are different routes, but the goal is the same.
So the vectors are different, but the goal is the same. You know, the end game is the
Yes.
same. Yeah.
Yes.
All right. Fascinating. Let's move on from that. And a bit of basics here, but I think this will form a very good ground for the conversation going forward. There's cyber fraud and there's financial aspect or the financial crime, if I can use that term. You guys, from the top of your head or from your experiences, what are the different types of financial crimes and how does cybersecurity, or let's say the cyberspace, you know, how does it foster these crimes? You know, think of it this way. For example, the crowd one. I think many of us know here know crowd one, or the the one we used to have before years back, public likes. You know, very famous. You know, a lot of money were made, billions of Kenya shillings and all that. Yeah, just could you let us know some of the financial crime and fraud that is out there, and really how cyberspace is um, helping facilitation of this crime. I'll start with Christopher.
Sorry, I'm really struggling to hear. I didn't hear the last part of the question.
Oh, yes. So you could let us know some of the financial crimes that you know of, and tell us how cyberspace helps facilitation of these crimes. Because again, we have, I think, a bunch of them, and cyberspace is becoming a core aspect of how they're happening.
Okay, thank you. I think I got that. So what I can think of top of my head is in the payment space, you know, where you have, I think the fancy word is identity theft, where the card details, like someone's card details, could be stolen either out of negligence, through, you know, hacking and you know, accessing the financial institute systems and picking that information, or even through like the staff, collusion among staff. So you can have your card details being used maybe in a different country, like you just see transactions that are happening on your account, and that becomes a bit complicated because, you know, there is concerns about jurisdictions, and then also how much effort are you going to put in to recover that, depending on where the transaction is happening. So the fact that you can do that so easily makes this a bit difficult to manage. But again, I would, in my opinion, I would recommend that it's better to try and have levels, like different levels of how you're going to combat this. Like every organization should try and protect this information, so, for lack of a better word, jealously, and do that in layers, so that if this fails, it would be picked up at a certain point. For example, train your users, teach them, like, what does it mean if I am checking a customer statement at a restaurant? And that's, you know, some new dynamic that comes in when people are working from home. Let your users know what it means. What does it mean if I send, you know, a statement to someone else and it's not theirs? So after you've done that, then you can also put in the technical controls, block the email, you know, make sure the person's computer is going to lock, just so we do not have to get there. And then also maybe the other thing that I would want us to think about is, how will the organization actually survive if this happens? That's also another conversation that we need to have as organizations. The other guys can add on to that.
Very well. I think what you said is true, makes a lot of sense. But I would also just want to, today I'm all about history, financial crime and fraud. So of course, way back before we went into the digital world, everything was happening on paper. Now we all have gone digital and running all our operations, using IT systems. So the same fraud that was happening on paper just moved to the new platform, which is the digital platform. And when we talk of financial fraud, cyber crime or cyber fraud just is one component of it. The only bit that it becomes so pronounced due to the fact that a number of, or not a number, majority of organizations are running financial systems on the digital platform. So that's how cyber fraud looks so pronounced. But however, if you just take a step back, it's basically the same fraud that used to happen on paper, just this time it's just happening on a different platform. But it's also important to note that other financial frauds have now a very close relationship with cyber fraud. So for example, corruption or embezzlement of funds. So you realize all this is happening, same crime, but now with a component of IT or digital bit of it. So it turns out to be cyber fraud. So if today you are a CEO of a bank and probably you know information about, or rather you do insider trading, based on information you found from, of course, from systems, will all fall under cyber fraud. Even going further, think of now even procurement fraud, where people involved in the procurement either collude with the suppliers or get some specific suppliers who they can, of course, collude with them, again happening digitally. So everything, the fraud that we used to know way back has just become more what I'll call advanced, and now using technology to perpetrate it. So we can think of all kinds of financial crimes that, ever exist in this world, then now push them to a digital platform and you have cyber fraud as a child.
That's a really good perspective of looking at it. And before I say what I want to say, Mike, do you have anything else to add to what has been said?
I think they've really exhausted most of what I also wanted to say. But again, it all boils down to some of the controls that you are putting in place, because as evolution of technology is happening and we are all day, every day adapting all this technology, it evolves down to what aspects you're putting in it. But I think Steve and CRISPR have really talked about it in details.
Good. All right, cool. So there are two particular ones that I think I'm interested in, and you guys can give some responses. The issue of let me even back it up a bit. All of you sort of brought in the aspect of people, whether it's in cybersecurity in general or particularly just about fraud. Because at the end of the day, it's the people who deal and it's the people who deal illicitly, right? So there's this aspect of people, and I'll think of it in two ways. One is identity theft as a huge, or identity fraud as a huge and very persistent kind of cyber fraud. And then the issue of insider threat actors. If you just mentioned how a CEO can do insider dealings and wire off money and things like those. And I think recently, not recently actually, in 2016, about $80 million was wired from Bangladesh Bank, from New York Reserve Bank to Bangladesh Bank. But of course, that was a fraudulent transaction. So how do you guys see these two types of fraud, and particularly within the African context? And anyone can have a go.
So first, I'm not sure that it's just me, but I lost your last statement.
Oh, okay, yeah. I want to get your thoughts around insider threats and identity fraud as two as two types of fraud of interest. And I just want to get your thoughts about the two within the African context. Any cases we've seen, how how they've gone down.
I think
Okay.
Okay, Felix, go ahead.
Okay, so in the beginning, I alluded to a case where I mentioned about that state-owned attack that was focusing on banks, and you've mentioned that case of the Bangladesh bank where around $80 million was wired fraudulently. Now, to this case, which was last month, some of our Kenyan banks, not even Kenyan only, but African countries' banks were also being targeted by these. And if you looked at how the whole architecture was, it was ideally about stealing users' information or getting people within the organization to sell out information about that organization to the for lack of a better word, cartel, so that they can go ahead and commit the crime. So with the way that these frauds are being orchestrated, we are seeing that at the end of the day, the person who is the most trusted by the organization, that is the user, and who is supposed also to be acting as the frontline defender of the organization when it comes to cybersecurity or cyber attacks, also falls prey to some of these deals, because these people come to them and they give them a very good deal. They tell them that if you give us this, probably we are going to give you an amount once it is done, and we are going to use your account. Or if the user is totally caught unaware, then you find that the perpetrators of these attacks are still focusing on that one user. So the attack vector, or there's a very huge shift on how systems are being attacked, because the perpetrators are attacking users who are users of specific systems that they know that they can benefit from, but they are not attacking systems as we thought that initially they would, because, for example, that case again, if they're targeting banks, and we all know that banks have put up enough security measures, well, almost enough security measures for to prevent direct system attacks. So they have firewalls after monitoring after all that. So, but we forget that the people perspective who are in charge of these systems, we are not really putting enough controls for them. So you find that people, the data for the people or the staff that are using the systems is actually being compromised. And this is where now you start finding out that insider threat is actually growing, because the people, the perpetrators, once they approach the staff in the organization, then they get to convince them to give them the credentials, and the organization falls victim to these perpetrators. And if they are not careful, again, if the users are not very careful and they go out using their organization credentials everywhere, especially on public Wi-Fi's, then they end up being stolen. And yes, it all boils down to the organization being victim. So question now should become, how now do we go ahead and protect these users from these perpetrators? And how does the organization come in play to identify some of the issues that, or some of the changes that insider threat pose to the organization?
That's a good point, and I'll throw these to CRISPR as well, because you do internal auditing, and I'm sure you've interacted a lot with insider fraud situations. Anything you have to say?
Thank you. So from my experience, I think I would want, for this conversation to be more about how we deal with it, because I'm thinking about two scenarios. One is where the person is aware of what they are doing. Like if you go to a big person in a financial institution and you're asking them for the information, they know what they are doing. And in my personal opinion, I feel that's a bit easier to deal with. But the bigger problem is when the person doesn't know what they are doing. So like someone just receives an email and they are told, you have won this, and they're excited, and you know, they're on your network. Like, they don't know, they are not aware. And then I've also noticed that you can have all these other, you know, good things that you do, but at the end of the day, it is very important that the person is aware. So if I were to advise, I would advise that, you know, you educate, you know, perform campaigns, put everyone on the spot, regardless of what level they are at in the organization. Let everyone know that it is their responsibility to protect whatever value you're creating and maintaining within your organization. Like, this should cut across, create awareness, and then maybe for the other, like for the person who knowingly gives up this information or leads to, you know, like the cases that you've been talking about, I think that sort of they stop being a fraudster, they are a criminal. And I think that's something that we would have to deal with outside the organization setting. But I don't think we can overemphasize awareness campaigns and trainings for the people that work with us, because it's, you know, you train people and they go, then others come. And even the people that are doing these, you know, the fraudsters, the guys that we are, you know, talking about, they know these things. So they know, you know, that you're going to tell people, when you see this email, make sure you know the sender, and then they'll improve that, you know, get to where you are. So for me, I think the emphasis really needs to be on training people, run campaigns, do this across the organization, and then also let everyone know that it's their job, that even if you're maybe like a receptionist or, you know, someone who is not, you might think that you're not in touch, you're not using the information that these guys could be looking for, but the fact that you are on the network, you need to know that you can be a target and educate, you know, what to do.
Yeah, absolutely. I think education is very fundamental across board, and just taking it from there and going into the issue of how we can actually deal with all of this. And I think this is where a lot of the how comes in, and a lot of the emphasis should be, as you mentioned. I want to start with from a regulatory perspective, because again, regulators, particularly in the highly regulated industries, they demand controls, they demand continuous improvement, they demand things like those, and awareness is, of course, core to that. So, you know, could you let us know, you know, what kind of demands do regulators have, you know, on organizations and the management and board over their ability to ensure assurance and compliance, you know, aspects of due diligence activities, particularly during this, you know, this unforeseen circumstance, you know, this crisis. No one knew it was coming. Probably we were never ready with our response plans and things like those. But I'll start with Steve here, if you can hear me.
Yes, I can.
Could you let us know some of the regulatory demands? Let us know some of the regulatory demands that you've seen or you anticipate, you know, when it comes to cyber fraud now going forward.
Very well, Cephas. And I think one thing regulators do is to push guidelines, laws, regulations to protect the industry. So, and of course, the same regulators have also picked that cyber crime and cyber fraud is a big risk, not only just to businesses, but to economy. So a number of laws have been pushed to cushion the industry as well as protect the end consumers. So, sorry. So, and I'll be very generic, I won't go to specific laws, but I'll just say from a general overview is that the regulations that are pushed are more of providing, more of like the baseline of what is expected of the business. So that if today you are an entity that is regulated, let's say in the financial sector, this is the bare minimum that is expected of you in terms of your cyber security or data privacy, you know, compliance. But however, that does not mean that once you meet the bare minimum, you can sit back. It's the baseline that has been set by the industry, by the regulator, to ensure that everyone at least conforms to that level. Now, for each and every other independent institution, they need to go a notch higher, of course, having done their own risk assessment to understand what's their risk appetite, and enhance that basic, or rather that baseline that has been provided by the regulator. So yes, regulator is sitting out there providing, those regulations as guidelines of what is expected in the industry, but players within the same industry are expected to go a notch higher based on their own organization appetite in terms of addressing the cyber fraud and cyber crime within the business. And one thing I've also picked, and I'll slightly diverge towards data privacy. GDPR also had a huge impact in terms of regulations that have been pushed by countries. GDPR, I call it the de facto data privacy regulation once it was released in 2017, if I'm not too wrong. Countries outside Europe now started, pushing for laws for data privacy to be in compliance with the GDPR, because it had, of course, that global kind of geographical reach. So regulators in various countries are also forced to start pushing. In Africa, a number of countries, of course, have pushed the laws. Others, I know, are still in the draft process. But sooner or later, a number of nations will be forced to even have a data privacy law that mimics what the GDPR recommends. Back to you, Cephas.
Yeah, you will actually just write to Krista and Michael.
Okay, I just have one small thing to add. In Uganda, so there's usually, when you talk about cyber, there's there's a default, I don't know if it's a culture, we always think about it as an IT problem. So what I know in Uganda, at some point, our regulator required that the board and senior management are actually trained on these things. So this helps to make the conversation easy, because some of the controls that you have in place, you have to put in place, cost money. So you need to be able to sell it to the guys that make the money decisions, so that they can know that, even if this hasn't happened, we are all, for as long as you have something valuable and you're working on the internet, which I think is every company, you could be a victim of a cyber fraud or something. So what the regulator helped was to push this knowledge, like to require the board and senior management to appreciate this, so that it is easy for them to support the initiatives of what other people could come up with to manage this. Thank you.
And that's a powerful issue when it comes to pushing the agenda for security and control, awareness from top down. And Michael, any thoughts around some of the regulatory dynamics and changes that we can see going forward, particularly those inspired by this crisis? Because again, I don't think you're never going to be the same again.
Yeah, that's true. And I want to focus on two things. One, self-regulatory without organization, and two, cyber insurance. Now, let me start with one, self-regulating, because initially, before even this crisis happened, very many companies were working haphazardly, very many of them. But then they realized that, wait, we need a cyber resilience journey, or we need our own regulations internally, so that we can be able to know how to handle cybersecurity incidents, and especially how to respond to cybersecurity incidents, because the people were not really, they did not have that culture of cybersecurity in them. So you find that a lot of organizations are working without, let's say, an information security policy or a data privacy policy. And one of the things that you find is that a lot of organizations operating that way, then they were very susceptible to some of what we are talking about, especially for insider threats. So one of the things that organizations really should put in place is have an internal regulatory procedure that regulates itself as the organization and also regulates the staff working for the organization, so that they can be able to tell their cybersecurity risk and posture at that moment. Because if internally they do not know on how to respond, they don't have that culture of cybersecurity, and they are not aware of what is really happening in the cybersecurity space, then they do not exactly know how to handle incidents that come to them. And I think this one cuts across everyone or every organization that has to deal with technology at some point. So if that's the case, then one, have a cybersecurity strategy within yourself. The cybersecurity journey does not end in 1 day or 1 month or 1 year. It's a very long process, and you have to take up the process. So I've seen a lot of organizations now trying to build up policies now that people are working from home now, because they did not have this one before. Now they are trying to see how can people work from home. And a lot of people were thinking about immediately when this crisis hit, we were seeing some of vulnerable software being exposed even more on the internet, because people are going for remote access tools so that they can be able to access what is within the office premise. But then they realized that this is not the safest way for people to work. So again, people now are starting to develop cybersecurity policies, information security policies, which I think it's very important for any organization out there to self-regulate first before they even take up any other regulations in place. So Steve has mentioned about Gdpr. If you're an organization, make sure that you are borrowing from that, because it will help you a lot. There are other policies that have been set up by governments itself. I know Uganda have a data protection act. Kenya will now do, and most of the other countries are also taking this up. So as an organization, align yourself internally for those policies to be in place. Number two, I'm looking at the cyber insurance space, because most of the people, again, before the pandemic hit, they did not know what to do in case something of this pandemic happened. So now that people are working from home, there were more issues that were happening, because at home we did not have firewalls that would protect the way these users are accessing organization assets. And it became an issue for a lot of organizations to be able to defend this working from home kind of culture. So I've seen a lot of conversations around cybersecurity insurance and how insurance can come in place to protect organizations when cybersecurity incidents happens to them. So an insurance is very good, especially if you have it from a person or an organization that understands what you really need to put in place. Because at the end of it all, an insurance, cybersecurity insurance is not the same as a car insurance. They are totally different, because you see, for a car, you have to, you are ensuring something that you can see, something that is tangible, and something that you can at least tell that this is what can happen if an accident happens. So you can be able to predict an outcome for that. But for cyber incidents, it's totally different. It's something that you cannot see. It's something that you cannot predict how it will happen or when it will happen. So it's very important that you as an organization get someone who can evaluate your risk posture and give you a cyber insurance that really fits your organization.
Interesting. I think I saw a report that spoke to the rise in uptake or adoption of cyber insurance, and a bit of it was related to this crisis, even from a regulatory perspective, because again, with the changes and the transforming work and the teleworking and everything, there's been a lot of incidences, and so companies are looking to adopt that insurance. Good point, Michael. As you wrap this conversation up in the next few minutes, I have three questions that I'm going to be asking you guys, but just being reminded here that someone has a question from the audience. Barbara, I am going to unmute you. Feel free to ask your question, Barbara.
Okay, hello.
Hello, we can hear you. Yes.
Okay. Mine was not a question. I was supplementing on what Crispr had talked about, the importance of educating and creating awareness in teams about cybersecurity. I wanted to share my experience. Earlier today, I got a pop-up on my phone telling me that I am among the few people who have won MTN something. Okay, I subscribe to MTN as a service, and they told me that I am going to win an iPhone, a Samsung, or a Tab, any of them, if I just follow and answer the next few questions within 2 minutes. The questions all seemed harmless. Which network do you use? Which phone would you prefer? Up to the last bit when they asked me to share my card details. That's when I am like, oh, but it looked so authentic and it looked all good. So what I did is I shared that whole link and the information with the MTN Customer Service Center, and they said they're going to follow up with these kind of guys. So what it means that there are very many people out there who are being defrauded. They don't know what to do. And some of them are even literate and IT literate, but they don't share this information. So there is importance in keeping on educating the public and the people we work with. Finally, when we talked about fraud in financial institutions, I have friends in the legal circles who admit that maybe there are quite a number of financial institutions that might be having such issues with their internal staff. But then the issue of taking these cases to court might affect client confidence. So they try to sort of hash out these things and settle between the person and the organization. I don't know how true that is, but maybe it's something that we might need to look at so that we see how maybe financial institutions can go about it. And finally, when you talked about policy, usually when we look at policy always plays catch up. We are always ahead of it. We are now working from home. We're doing a lot of online transactions, but in most countries, we don't have policy or laws that are going to be able to protect the consumer or a lot of people transacting. So maybe that's also another area that we need to be able to maybe educate ourselves on. Thank you very much.
You're welcome, brother. Fascinating. Of course, typically with most fraud and particularly scam type of frauds, there will be two elements. There will be a promise of a prize, and then there will be a sense of urgency. Do this in a minute, do this in 2 minutes, and like the case that you had. So it really gives you that rush, and the excitement, that moment, and then bingo. You give your details and everything, and what happens thereafter happens. But I love your second point. There's that issue of fear of reputation damage and things like those. And Steve, you can briefly in a minute speak to that as well.
Thank you, because I was just boiling with a comment in my head. So yeah, I think Barbara, that was very good of you. I think that's something that we've also picked even here in Kenya, that despite us offering forensic investigation and probably having some suspects, majority of organizations will probably just let go that stuff and not follow, with the due process, the legal process, which at some point is very understandable. One, there is frustrations when you're dealing with the prosecution process, takes long, again, also the reputation of the organization. So majority of the people of organizations would want not to go beyond the bit of it. An internal stuff involved, let go of this stuff, we move on with life. But what that does is, remember when we started off the conversation of fraud, you've created an incentive that I can go perpetrate this fraud, take away about $10,000 or $20,000, be fired, move on to the next organization. Now, that one way or the other does promote the vice. Secondly, and this is a challenge I think now to our legal and judicial systems, that we need to improve the speed of prosecution of cases that are brought, into the legal or into the courts or the legal system. Because the more a case is delayed, the more people lose hope with the case. It becomes too tiring. At the end of the day, the person who's been there's a legal term they use that, but anyway, in English, the person who's been impacted does not feel that they got justice at the end of the day. So I think it's two ways. There is the bit of the organization where they need, of course, to follow the due process, but they can only do that if the legal system is welcoming, is open, is efficient, effective, and at the end of the day, they'll feel that some justice, or rather they have got some justice out of the entire process. So what Barbara said, yes, is something I think we've also seen a lot here in Kenya. There are people we know who've been involved in cyber fraud. They're still walking around in the streets, and yeah, nothing really much can happen to them.
It's a tricky situation. Yeah, Michael?
Yeah, just maybe it's a tricky situation. Yes, I do agree, but maybe it's because of the kind of a system that we are in. So we are in a place where laws are created but not implemented. We are in a situation where bad guys are caught but not prosecuted. And the reason why all that is possible, because again, if you look at the number of cyber lawyers that we have, it's very minimal. So trying to explain to a court or a judge that there was this kind of a fraud that happened on the technological space. So trying to explain some of the technical jargons become very hard for them to understand, and they will have to push it to another team. And the more teams that we have means the more delay that we get in terms of justice for that person who has been affected. So I think the system needs to be really thought of, because we in the security space cannot work with the law enforcement. And if the police are the people who get there first and then they destroy the evidence, then the judges will not accept that evidence. And it's all an ecosystem that needs to work together. But until the time we all get to work together, most of the cases that we get to see, especially in the cyberspace, might take a lot of time to be prosecuted or not ever get prosecuted. And I think that point of the telco sending that SMS, it's something that I have seen in the last week happening a lot. I'm sure for the Kenyans that are in attendance, you probably have seen that Safaricom scam, which Safaricom is one of the biggest telco in Kenya, that says that you are supposed to win a specific thing, just like it has been explained. So, and then after you go ahead filling up all those details, at the end of it all, you are asked to share, before you get to win, you share a contact or not, or you share that message in a group, a WhatsApp group where more people can get to click. So I think there's an attention that has been focused to our telcos, because everyone is ideally using a telco. So if you find a message from your telco saying that there's this prize to be won, most of the people get to believe about that. And then it boils down to the people who don't know about the cybersecurity concerns that are out there, who will go ahead and click, give all the details until they're defrauded.
Yeah, good point. And that is a difficult scam. It happens a lot. Back to you, Krista. I'm actually going to share some questions for the few of you, but let me start with Krista. Could you tell us how we can deal with cyber fraud or financial fraud from your own work and your own experiences? And then Steve, you can give us an overview of how organizations, and particularly the SMEs, how can they can develop cyber and fraud risk resilience, starting with a strategy going forward. And then Michael, you can give us some perspectives around how you can use data as an asset to try and reduce the risk of fraud, whether it's internal, whether it's from outside and things like those. But all of you again can also chime in into the other questions. But let me start with Christian.
Okay, thank you. So this is what I would advise. First, you need to identify what's of value, or at least know how each piece of information that you have is valuable. And again, all this is going to go back to training, like the people, because the organization is people. Even the information that is, resting in a database somewhere is going to be managed by a person. So it's very important that you identify the value of what you have. Even if it's something as simple as a phone number, know how important it is for you to protect, or you can't just freely share that phone number, and there's a lot that a fraudster can do if they got that phone number. So you start with identifying the assets that you have, what value do they have to your organization, and what are you going to do to protect them. Then with everything, for example, if you come up with what are they called, like a goal that your business is trying to achieve, and then you've identified what could go wrong, I think that should be part of a risk assessment. You know what is going to go wrong, but at the end of the day, you also have a customer on the other side. Then you start to ask yourself, how am I going to be able to continue to how am I going to be able to continue to give this value to the customer? For example, if you're a telco, then you ask yourself, if what you're giving the customer is the ability to make the phone call, then how am I going to be able to do this irrespective of what's happening? So that's, I think I've said like 3 things. So you identify what assets you have, what value do they have, how are you going to protect them from whatever could go wrong with them, and then how are you going to continue to serve your customers irrespective, regardless of if the things that you worry could happen to your data or your information happen. But then again, it's very, I think I cannot overstress user education, because if everyone in the organization is on the same page, then even the things that require technical solutions are easy to implement, that people know what they are doing. You have, like you said in the beginning, people appreciate that if I steal money from the organization, I am not stealing someone's money. This is going to, trickle down to affect me personally. How am I going to get a salary or a bonus, my reputation? And then you think about your family. So I think at the end of the day, you need to get the message, get the message across to the people, let everyone know what they are supposed to do, how they are supposed to prevent this, and how this affects them personally, and then as part of the organization.
Interesting. Steve?
Very well. I think looking from an organization point of view, I think the tone has to be set from the top. And that also comes to what CRISPR was saying, that that bit of awareness, even from the board level, and the awareness at the board level is not a matter of what's a phishing email, how it comes. No, it looks at what's the impact of cyber crime to our business. Does it impact into our business strategy? Does it impact the organization's growth? How can we be able to set up a roadmap for the organization, so that as we continue to digitize, as we continue to grow our business, security, and also cyber security, is a critical component of part and parcel of that strategy and growth. Then, of course, the same message also needs to go to the management and the rest of the staff. Of course, technology will be there, will support the entire process. Very good. Processes, of course, will also supplement, but at the end of the day, people is always the critical point at awareness level, and everyone's knowing that they have a responsibility. Every staff should know that they have a responsibility to play to protect the organization. To the SME, I think there used to be a lot of assumption that cyber criminals were after the big banks, the big insurance, big hospitals, not the SMEs. But unfortunately, that's not the case. We've seen quite a number of incidents where SMEs have been impacted by cybercrime, more so ransomware, due to the virtue that they were not prepared and the assumption that this thing was for the big corporates, not for SMEs. Now, for the SMEs, it's important to note that one, some of them, yes, we appreciate they may not have the enough resources. Resources, I mean, in terms of personnel. And this is the time for SMEs to start thinking of outsourcing that service to a service provider who will be able to run and manage the security for them. Then they can focus on the core business instead of trying to, instead of them trying to start up a new department for IT or even IT security. So for SMEs, I would propose outsource that service to a service provider, a managed security service provider who will be able to handle the security of the business. And also, more so because that's their core business, they're even able to advise the SME in terms of IT investments and other related investments. Then, of course, as the SMEs grows, and I think Felix alluded to this, insurance is something that is worth considering. But of course, don't jump into insurance before you've even set your house in order. So ensure the basics is done so that by the time you go to the insurance company, they are giving you competitive products that at a competitive premium. And of course, at the end of the day, you want to ensure that in case an inevitable occurs, at least there's a cushion to protect your business. So I'll still insist on people. At the end of the day, it's, as I said, it's a societal issue. We need to deal with the people. Back to you, Cephas.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. Michael, any thoughts on the issue of how data is really vital to facilitate protection from fraud?
Yes, so I think data is the only resource that we have in terms of fighting cybercrime, because the more data we have, the more we get to understand how cybercriminals work, and the more we are able to detect and predict how they get into organizations. So let me just give an example that most of the organizations nowadays are looking towards having either a SIM, that is a security, a security orchestration management system, or a SIM. Others are looking towards either having a managed security, because all these systems are working with data. And if you have enough data as an organization, then you can be able to predict when and how a specific attack is going to happen. So data is really playing a key critical point in terms of identifying. And you remember at some point I alluded to the fact that organizations also need to be to know how to detect how an insider threat is coming up within the organization. And how do the organization do that? Is via data. So if, for example, an employee used to come to the office at 8 and leaves at 5, and then all of a sudden the employees start coming in at 6 a.m. or 7 a.m., then leaves at 4, and then the activity that they do within the system has changed, then that is information that you as an organization should be looking at and identifying that there is a change on how this specific person behaves within the organization. So it's important for me to go and ask them, is there a problem? Or for me to just keep monitoring on that. And that is all thanks to the kind of information that we get. So organizations need to start thinking from a perspective of how much data can we collect about ourselves so that we can be able to tell what is really happening. It's like a knowledge base, basically. So if you're aware of what information you have, what information you need, then you can be able to tell in terms of cyber attacks, what kind of cyber attacks are you prone to, what kind of insider threats, how can you be able to identify them. And if you are looking more into systems, you can think of the managed security way, because then people will be there, or trained experts will be there to tell you that there's this and this happening within your organization or within your network organization that you need to have a look at and pay keen attention to that, thanks to the data that the security system that has picked. So data is really playing a key role in terms of identifying and preventing some of the security concerns that we are really talking about.
Fascinating. Awesome. So any parting shot from okay, fine, you guys can give us your parting shot and some of the practical recommendations you can you think would help our audience. Let me start with Chris.
Thank you. There's a question I've seen from the chat that I want to attempt to address. How can organizations gain assurance over third parties without physical site visits? Can remote options replace site visits? So from my experience, I don't think there is a one size fits all. So for example, if the third party is hosting your information on their servers, on servers that are physically located at their location, for something like that, it would be very important that you actually go and do the site location. But if it is, something like you want to just check their security controls, that is something that you can do remotely. I do not want, okay, again, like I said, there is no one size fits all. I think we need to look at it, like we look at each situation differently. So then you ask yourself, how important is it for me to actually go, do the site visits? So if it's not something that, they don't have any physical something that's kept there, it might not be necessary. But again, that's an assessment that you have to do. Then you make a decision depending on each case. My parting shots. I hope each and every one of us has picked something from this session. I have learned from the other panelists and the questions, the comments in the chats. And I'm hoping that we can all go back to our companies or our employers and, spread the word, and we are better prepared to deal with cyber fraud. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Steve, as you do your parting shot, you could respond to this question that how can organizations gain assurance over third parties without physical? Oh, okay.
It's the same question.
That is the one. Sorry, my confusion. There's another one here though. Have the effectiveness of fraud controls and transaction monitoring been reviewed to reflect drastic changes in payment volumes in the financial sector? I guess that is sector specific.
Hello?
Can you hear me?
Yes, now I can hear you.
Okay, yeah. So yeah, there's this question in the chat that have the effectiveness of fraud controls and transaction monitoring been reviewed to reflect the drastic changes in payment volumes in the financial sector? Any thoughts on that as you give us your parting word?
I think the good thing with any tool that is deployed to give information on any suspected fraud enables the organization to be more prepared. And I think with the huge volumes of transactions happening, and for a good example would be now during the pandemic period, where financial institutions advised that we interact with their systems either through mobile and through online services. More and more transactions now do occur, and of course it becomes a bit how do I put it? We need to use more advanced technology for us to be able to pick up, those suspected or unauthorized transactions. And thanks, we have technology, artificial intelligence, which can be used a lot to improve and provide efficiency in fraud mitigation strategies that the organizations are deploying. Regarding parting shots, I think I'll just re-emphasize what I had spoken about earlier. Cybersecurity is everyone's business, and the more organizations start realizing that cyber security has a huge impact on the growth of the institution, as well as the profitability, they'll start putting more emphasis, not just on technology investment, but on the people, the processes, and also it's also an opportunity to benchmark with other organizations. I think early on somebody alluded when we were discussing of the same monkey, but in different forests. There's also the bit of nobody is doing benchmarking. So if you don't know what your competitors or what other industries are doing, you'll end up implementing or focusing on the, not I would call it the wrong areas, but I'll say you'll end up focusing your resources in a different avenue rather than focusing on where the adversary is targeting. So it's very important to benchmark. And with benchmarking is a matter of looking at another organization, either within your industry or outside, figure out what they are doing, mistakes they have done, learn from those mistakes and keep on improving. And benchmarking is like mentorship. It's not just one-way traffic. It should be both ways. So if you learn also from one organization, also take the opportunity also to share the same knowledge with another organization. And that's how we build an ecosystem of secure organization. We secure the economy. And by and large, we are all able to mitigate cybercrime. Thanks. Back to you, Cephas.
Fantastic. Michael, you can close it out for us.
Okay, so one, I'd like to thank everyone who has been in attendance in this webinar. It's been very conversational and very educative. My parting shot will be, Steve has mentioned that it's everyone's business for security, but I want to also add that let security be part of your culture. In as much as we are of a certain culture, in as much as we believe on something, let us also believe that security is something that we really should be looking at. And I'm talking from a point of, let us not become very addicted to our technologies, because at the end of the day, the more addictive we get, the more control we get, and the more data we give out there. So the more data that is out there, the more vulnerable we are. So let us have security as part of our culture, day-to-day lives. How you use your social media, be very careful about how you use it, how you interact with people online, or what you get to share online. Ideally, let security be part of everything that you do, both in organizations and also in your personal life, because you become a target because of who the other people see you are. And if they see that you are a person who is of interest, then you become of interest to them, and you become more vulnerable towards some of the goodies that will come into you. So let's have security as part of our culture. Let's have it implanted within ourselves. If we have an ISO 27000 for each and every individual, I would recommend for everyone to take it, but apparently we don't. So just let everyone around you and everyone within you know that security is their concern.
Maybe we should develop a personal cybersecurity strategy or resilience.
Yes, we should. Yeah.
Well, yeah. Again, the culture is a very, very important aspect of security at all levels. And across sectors, and of course not just organizationally, but also individually. So our culture is key. People are key, and then. Sorry about that. So thanks. Thanks for taking time to speak in the group today, and we appreciate you, Michael, Steve, and Krista. I hope all our audience you've learned much, even if it is a few things, it's still okay. But I hope all of us have learned much, as I can see from your comments in the chat. I wish you guys all the best, and have a very restful and peaceful weekend. And I will invite Lisa to close this session down for us. Bye, everyone. Lisa?
Thank you, Cephas.
Okay.
Thank you, Cephas. To the panelists, Steve, Crispa, and Felix, thank you so much for your time. Surely it's really been a lot of great lessons that we've learned. Hopefully the participants have gotten an opportunity to document these lessons. A lot of learnings also on best practices, especially in this time when we are facing this pandemic. So thank you to all the participants that have taken their time to also be with us in this session. We'd also want to point out that we will be taking a break, only that we'll not be having any webinar next week, but to resume back on the 9th of October. Otherwise, thank you to everyone, and Cephas, we really appreciate the fact that you take time to moderate our sessions, and have a great weekend to all. Thank you.
You have a fantastic weekend, everyone.